Welcome back, everyone, to yet another episode of Hear Me Out, the show where we discuss hard topics from a Christian viewpoint. I'm Chino.
And I'm Kongwa, and we'll be your host for tonight.
Now, last week we talked about COVID-19.
We discussed guidelines and how well the nation has reacted to the pandemic.
If you guys haven't already, go back and watch it, and make sure to hit the subscribe button to catch up on any of the latest episodes.
This week, we are discussing something that's very close to my heart: cultural appropriation.
We'll be looking into whether a cultural appropriation is inherently bad or if it has to do with the intentions behind it.
So I went out to the campus and asked students about what they thought about it. And here's what they had to say. So, do you know what cultural appropriation is?
I have an idea. I won't say my definition is super exact, but it's really taking an idea from one culture and having another one almost claim it as its own, or kind of adopt it as an addition to their own almost. So
cultural appropriation is taking other people's cultures and kind of putting our own little twists on them and taking them out of context, like things like Cinco de Mayo.
So cultural appropriation is taking a culture or displaying a certain culture, taking a certain trait and credit it as your own.
You've had an experience with this, right?
Well, not as much. I've seen a lot of cultural appreciation rather than appropriation. Because people want to learn about our culture and want to do some things.
So have you ever personally experienced it before?
you say it kind of like it's a bad thing, but I don't think it really is. Just because I think that people are diverse, and that's a good thing. And to want to kind of take a little piece of this culture and this culture and this culture and put it kind of together, like, I think that's a good thing, because I think God likes our diversity. And whenever people try to extend their reaches farther than their own culture, I think that's a good thing.
So to you, cultural appropriation is basically cultural appreciation by including other cultures and recognizing them and celebrating them, right?
Yes, I would say so. I mean, and the thing is, it's a hard line to walk, because it can be imitated in a mocking way, and that's whenever it's not okay. You know, it has to be taken as appreciation, like you're saying.
It's okay if in the past you have somebody has like in a certain situation was like culturally appropriated a certain fashion or a certain thing. It's okay because you didn't know. Right. But from now, if you know, now it's time for you to be aware and for you to share.
So we have heard about what your peers have to say about cultural appropriation. We'll continue this conversation back at the studio.
What are you looking for in a college? Many students discover that when they attend a large university, they become just another face in the crowd. Well, not at SAGU. Here, there is one professor to every 19 students. Our average annual cost is half of the national average for other private schools, and we award $28 million annually in financial aid, with 92% of students receiving some form of financial assistance. So, if you haven't given SAGU a close look, perhaps it's time.
Hi, my name is Ruth Otis, and I'm a double major in education and psychology, and I'm excited about being on tonight's show.
My name is Nathan Goodrich. I'm a senior here at SAGU, graduating in the spring. I'm an English major. A little bit about myself: I have lived in North Carolina and Illinois. I love writing and I love literature, and I'm excited to be on the show tonight.
Welcome back, everyone. We're here at our discussion floor. We're going to dive deeper into the topic of cultural appropriation. We're going to welcome Nathan, and we have Ruth with us here on the computer. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're going to get started. So, Ruth, I'll start with you. First question is, how would you define cultural appropriation?
I think cultural appropriation has a lot to do with disrespect, and I think there's a part of it that has to do with overreacting to something that's not necessarily meant to be disrespectful.
Okay. Okay. What about you, Nathan?
I would define it as, from what I've always understood about it, it's like taking something from someone else's culture without really recognizing its origin. Taking something that is originally started in another culture and then acting as if it's from your culture instead of recognizing its origin.
Okay. Nathan, in your opinion, how does cultural appropriation affect us as a society?
As a society, I think if a lot of cultural appropriation goes unaddressed, it kind of skews our sense of where our practices come from, of where activities come from, and also for those who suffer, whose cultural items are stolen from them, it can create a lot of bitterness, I think, and divisiveness. It can make it hard for them to want to engage with the rest of society if they feel like they're not being appreciated and respected.
Yeah, that's really good. Ruth, what about you? In your opinion, how does cultural appropriation affect us as a society?
Yeah, so I think it encourages division. I think that both sides end up really feeling hurt, the side of the accused and the side of that is disrespected. I think that it leaves a mark of distrust and a broken relationship, um, and just an overwhelming sense of unforgiveness, which makes it really hard to interact with each other.
Yeah, that's so true. So next question is, have either of you had any personal experience with cultural appropriation, and how did that affect you? And Ruth, we'll start with you.
So I don't know if I've ever had a personal like experience with cultural appropriation, but I mean everybody sees it on Facebook. And the one issue that really probably stood out to me the most is when I was in grade school. I grew up next to a large college, and some university students went to a football game dressed as a mascot, who was the chief Illiniwek. And so the mascot himself was the great grandson of this great chief of our area.
Oh, wow.
But these individuals were wearing the costume, and they got drunk and they were rude to a whole bunch of people, and the community got up in arms. And as a result, we lost our mascot.
Really?
Yeah. So I think with that, obviously they shouldn't have been rude. They shouldn't have been doing what they were doing. There's really no excuse for it. But at the same time, go so far to say that we can't use our mascot and honor this tribe of our area, when it was really just some drunk college kids who probably didn't mean any harm.
Yeah. So would you say that like their intentions weren't to harm anyone? They weren't negative. They just happened to, do something dumb while dressed up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nathan, what about you? Have you ever had any personal experience with cultural appropriation, and how did that affect you?
I can't say that I've ever been affected by it. I can't say that I've ever looked at anything anyone had ever done and thought that was cultural appropriation against me. I've heard people talking about it, but I can't say that I've really ever had it affect me.
Okay.
Or really have that much personal experience with it.
Gotcha.
Mostly just hearing about it, hearing people talk about it.
What are some of the kind of like things that you've heard?
One of the strongest things that stands out is a podcast I listened to once, and they're talking about writing fiction, and it was the question of how do you deal with cultural appropriation in writing fiction and writing novels. And I remember at the time that I watched it, it it frustrated me a little bit because the discussion was confusing to me, and it was hard for me to understand based on the way they were talking about it, where the line was between, trying to represent something and outright stealing it. And so I felt like there's a lot of discussion about it, especially like in media and stories and the such, but I don't feel like I've ever heard an adequate explanation as far as what constitutes appropriation in those contexts versus what constitutes just like representation or imitation. And so that was kind of my initial impression of the whole concept.
Gotcha. That's really good. So our last question here, and these will be kind of the last remarks from you guys. The question is, how do you think we as a society should respond to cultural appropriation? Ruth.
Okay, so one, we need to be held accountable individually, and in those instances where cultural appropriation is assumed, the parties that are having an issue need to work it out. And they need to actually work it out. They need to not show up on Facebook 3 days later and blast everybody. I think the whole issue with disrespect, in my opinion, is I have this belief, and it's about salt and sugar. If somebody is honestly trying to offend you, give it some more sugar and add a little bit of salt, and somewhere in there you might find their actual intention. Does that make sense?
I think so. Could you kind of explain it a little bit more?
So if my friend hurt me, I would step back from the issue and give it some thought. Two, I would apply some sugar. Say, maybe they didn't mean it like that. Maybe I could have done this or this, and maybe that would have helped the situation. And the salt is truth. So we all have our personal perception of reality, and a lot of times it might be skewed slightly to what actual reality is. And I think it's important to open our eyes and look around and see our version of reality matches up to everything else around us. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, makes great sense. Nathan, how do you think we as a society should kind of respond and address cultural appropriation?
I think one of the most important things is a discussion about cultural appropriation. For my story I just shared, I think something that a lot of people need is just for us to talk about what it is, for people who are affected by it, to like in a nice, in a discussion kind of a manner, say, hey, this is what cultural appropriation is. Because I think first of all, we can't really deal with it if people, don't really understand what even constitutes cultural appropriation. And so I think the most important thing to do is to have a discussion about it, a nice discussion where we identify what it is and we start, helping us actually see what it is.
Yeah.
And then we can start the conversation of how do we unappropriate? How do we get people involved in the right way?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. I feel like this is a topic that can often be overlooked, and it's something I've actually been affected by. But yeah, I really, really appreciate your guys' insight and your guys' opinions and your thoughts. So thank you again. Next up, we're going to be hearing from Kangwa about what she has to say on this subject.
So, cultural appropriation is also known as cultural disrespect. It's the use of objects or elements of a non-dominant culture in a way that does not respect their original meaning or give credit to their source. And it also can reinforce stereotypes with the intention of belittling the culture in an intentionally derogatory way. This week's directive is to prevent the normalization of cultural appropriation by bringing awareness to it. Awareness brings a sense of responsibility, which gives people self-awareness and challenges their morality to change and gives others the exact same opportunity so that we can turn cultural appropriation into cultural appreciation and learn about one another's culture so we can be a people who understand one another and meet one another where we are, and have more unity as the body of Christ.
And now it's time for Dumb Debates with Tim, the part of the show where Tim has a dumb debate. So without further ado, Dumb Debates with Tim.
So, as you boys know, as you men know, the sun goes down a whole hour early.
Yeah,
So,
it does do that.
You know what that gives me the opportunity to do?
What does give you the opportunity?
Sunbathe. No,
it gives
don't,
me,
less sunbathing.
It gives me an extra hour to look at the moon.
Exactly.
Well, the moon is fake. The moon landing itself was fake. I, Jonathan Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt III.
Jonathan Jacob Jimmerhanger III.
You know,
Yeah,
I
close
can
enough.
already confirm that my colleague is lying. His actual name is Caleb Garrison. I have checked him out in the library before, so I know this
Why were you
information.
checking me out in the library?
Because it's my job.
you were just following me and checking me out in the library? That's
As in I
kinda
was
creepy.
checking out your books. You know what I meant. Stop being pretentious.
I don't know.
No, he's been kind of eyeing me all tonight.
That's kind of
I mean, you're not wrong.
That's kind of
Kind of sus. I know I look dapper in the suit, but man, control
You
yourself.
you look very nice. I don't want to even
You know,
touch
you
No,
have
you better
chosen
not.
to represent your facts with attire, and I shall represent them with actual credentials.
And,
Hello, my name is the
and-
Reverend
and
Jacob
less,
Duffin.
Less attire? Because all I see
I-
is a t-shirt and a jacket.
You know,
thought
I
was
am
super-
representing my alma mater, the Southwestern
Okay,
Assemblies of God
so let's
University.
hear why you think it's fake.
Jacob. It's Jacob, right? Okay. So first off, no interrupting. Thank you. The moon landing is one of the greatest fake outs in American history. And I'm not necessarily going to say, you know what, there is a 1 in a billionth chance that it happened. But are you more willing to say that the government, who has covered up time and time again, who has invaded Iraq or whatever Middle East country has the most oil nowadays to give them freedom, can you tell me that the government who lies about everything did not lie to you about the moon landing? Can you say that with an honest look in my eye?
Well, first, I would like to throw a yellow flag for
That's a mask.
Flag
I
on
mean,
the play. Can we pick this
Yes,
up? Can we get-
there was a
I
flag on
wouldn't.
the
He
play.
seems
Can we get-
contagious.
there
we get
was
this
a
flag on the play?
facts.
there was a logical fallacy that was. You know, I didn't interrupt you, so I'd appreciate if you didn't interrupt me either. I
Okay.
showed you that respect.
Okay.
There was a logical fallacy on your play, specifically a false equivalency. You're assuming that just because somebody has done something in the past, that is false every time. My friend, my colleague, that is a logical fallacy.
All I heard was a run-on sentence.
You know, you're right. I am attempting to work on that. It is every person has struggles, and that is my struggle.
Everybody, yeah.
Everyone
has
does
struggles.
have their struggles. Mine's just being too handsome.
Oh, hey,
I mean, that is not a false statement. I
Hey.
wish
Thank
that
you.
I.
Thank you. So you're telling me that the government who has...
Sir, can you look at me when you talk, please?
I would love to look at you when I talk. So can you tell me, without a shadow of a doubt, that the government who has lied constantly and time again did not lie about this? We have Nixon, we have Clinton, we have Trump, we have Hillary Clinton. we have all these people.
On
And
the
you're telling me that, yeah, on the spectrum. Are you going to tell me and the American people that the moon landing there isn't a shred of like evidence that says the moon landing was fake?
How about, because are you in politics? Are you a politician?
No.
You look like one. You look
Well,
like a very
thank
handsome
you.
politician.
I have a very
But
commanding presence.
you do.
I do. Don't touch
Take
me.
the lead on this. Go ahead. Close us
Okay,
out.
thank you.
Well, not with mine.
Excuse me, if
Thank
I
you.
may have the chance to speak for a second. You say that this was faked. I would ask you, how would they have been able to fake it with the technology available in the 1960s? I shall cite the most scholarly of sources, Adam Ruins Everything from College Humor. and,
YouTube, yes.
College Humor,
College
not
humor,
YouTube.
yes.
Yes.
Humor, jokes, and stuff.
Yes,
like
it's-
the evidence that you're throwing out is a joke.
I mean, that's a fair, you know, you can make that assumption. But the fact remains
All
that
right.
in the 1960s, digital media technology had not progressed far enough to make the fakes that you so claim happened. And we have
That's
many.
a good point. That's a good point. But we're gonna go ahead and just leave it up to our viewers. What do you guys think?
What do
Go
you think?
comment down below. Was the moon landing fake
It
or
was
was
fake.
it real? I don't know.
It was faked. You bunch of silly gooses.
Whatever.
This silly goose.
Okay,
over
okay,
here.
okay.
That is an ad hominem attack.
Okay,
Another
we're
flag
outta
on the
here.
play.
We're out of here. Cut it. Cut it.
I think he has a point. Maybe we didn't go to the moon after all.
Anyway, whether we went to the moon or not, there's still so much to discover about the people around us here.
We'd love to hear what you guys think about cultural appropriation. So leave a comment down below so we can hear you out.
Bye.